My wife and her sister fired me the moment they took over the business. You're just dead weight. They laughed. I nodded and walked out. The next day, their mother called screaming, "You idiots, you just fired the sole patent holder." They turned pale as the legal ownership clause hit them hard, because the patent was, "My name is Carter Brenner. I'm 52, an engineer by trade, and for the last 22 years, I was the co-founder and technical director of Brenner Modular Systems." What started in my late father's garage in Irondequoit grew into a respected, niche manufacturing company specializing in modular components for robotics and medical tech. It was honest work, mechanical, hands-on, and sometimes painfully tedious, but it paid well, and it gave me pride. Melina, my wife of 24 years, joined the company full-time about 10 years ago after she got her CPA. She managed the books, handled payroll, and gradually became the face of the business in financial circles. Daria, her younger sister, came on board shortly after. At first, she helped with shipping and inventory, but Melina mentored her through budgeting and client relations. In time, Daria became the go-to person for onboarding clients and negotiating new contracts. It felt good in the beginning, like we were building something together. Family-run, tight-knit. But over the past 2 years, things changed. After my father passed away, I took it harder than I expected. He wasn't just my dad. He was my mentor, my sounding board, the man who could walk into the shop, nod at a misaligned bearing, and know exactly how to fix it. When he died, a part of my drive went with him. I still came to work. I still developed new iterations of our joint assembly systems. But I let Melina and Daria take the front-facing leadership roles. It was a mistake I didn't realize I was making. I trusted them. Why wouldn't I? While they were running board meetings and investor calls, I was in the basement of our home most nights, tweaking designs. In 2017, I finally completed and filed a patent for an innovative modular joint system. It was adaptable, required fewer recalibrations, and could sustain more dynamic weight without compromising structure. That single patent turned into the foundation of our best-selling products within 3 years. The patent was in my name. That wasn't an oversight. Our legal counsel at the time said it was cleaner and more tax-efficient to register it personally first, with an option to license it to the company. I never transferred it. It just stayed under my name. I figured we'd deal with the licensing paperwork later when we had time. But the truth was, no one ever followed up. Least of all Melina and Daria. By the end of 2023, I noticed I was being slowly edged out. I wasn't included in meetings anymore. Decisions I used to make without question were now subject to board discussion. Financial reports were delivered late, or not at all. I'd ask simple questions and get vague, patronizing answers. "We're realigning the structure. You don't need to worry about that now. Let's not overcomplicate things." I even caught wind of a few meetings with new investors I wasn't invited to. One of our longer-tenured engineers mentioned in passing, "Did you approve that capital reallocation? Daria said you'd signed off." I hadn't, but I didn't make a scene. Then came the day I walked in and got fired by my wife and her sister. "You're just dead weight," Daria had said. It stuck with me. The way she smiled when she said it, like it was a joke. Like I wasn't the man who trained her on inventory systems and stayed up till 2 a.m. fixing her mess-ups when she was new. I walked out. I didn't look back. The next morning, I was sitting in the driveway with a mug of coffee, watching the sun try to melt the frost off the windshield, when my phone rang. It was Rona, Melina, and Daria's mother. Her voice was so loud, so panicked, I could hear her before I even said hello. "You idiots," she was screaming at someone in the background. "You just fired the only person with a legal right to the patent. He OWNS it. What the hell were you thinking?" I sat there, listening quietly as she unleashed on them, oblivious that I'd picked up. After a few seconds, I ended the call without saying a word. For the first time in months, I smiled. You see, without that patent, they had no product. The joint system made up over 70% of our revenue. All the new clients they'd signed, all the contracts they were so proud of, it was all built on my intellectual property. That afternoon, I called Jennifer Pong, an IP attorney I knew from Buffalo. She reviewed the patent documents and pulled up our internal contracts. The licensing agreement had never been executed. In other words, the company had been using my patent with no legal right. "Technically," Jennifer said, "they've been infringing since day one. You've got them by the throat, Carter." Within 48 hours, we sent a cease and desist letter to the company, barring them from manufacturing, distributing, or profiting from any product containing my patented design. That meant everything came to a halt. Assembly lines, supplier orders, shipments in transit. They panicked, tried to scramble, tried to rebrand and use alternate parts. But none of it worked. You can't unbuild the foundation once it's been laid in stone. They tried to contact me, of course. First Melina texted, something vague and passive like, "Can we please talk?" I ignored it. Then came a voicemail from Daria, her voice forced and dripping with performative concern. "Carter, this is a misunderstanding. We can work something out. Don't let this get ugly. Think of the staff, the clients. The same clients I'd personally built prototypes for in our garage. The same staff I'd hired, trained, and stood beside on the factory floor while they figured out the machines. And now I was being asked to show mercy to the people who told me I was dead weight. I let them sweat. It didn't take long for the financial hemorrhaging to start. One by one, contracts were canceled, clients pulled out, suppliers froze shipments, and several high-profile partners demanded answers. The joint system was the cornerstone of nearly every major agreement. Without legal rights to produce it, they were dead in the water. Melina's response was to get lawyers involved. Bad move. They tried to argue that since I developed the patent while working at the company, it should be considered company property. Jennifer, my attorney, dismantled that argument in minutes. There were no employment clauses that transferred invention ownership. In fact, I wasn't even technically salaried when I developed it. It was done during a gap period when I was drawing from equity, not payroll. Worse, they found internal emails between Melina and Daria laughing about pushing Carter out and how he probably doesn't even remember the IP paperwork. That went over well in court. When their own legal team realized the mess they were in, the tone changed. Suddenly, I was being offered backroom deals, a generous licensing agreement, a minority stake in the new direction of the company, even a heartfelt letter supposedly from Melina, saying she regretted how things had gone and wanted to rebuild. But the thing about betrayal is, it doesn't reverse. It calcifies. It roots itself. They didn't just cast me aside. They laughed while doing it. They were already planning a new office expansion when they kicked me out. They thought I'd fade into the background, some tired old engineer they could outmaneuver. Now their building was half empty, and their accounts were bleeding. I waited another 3 months. Not out of spite, but strategy. I wanted the bankruptcy filing to be inevitable. I wanted them to reach the point where their investors were walking away, where their new hires were leaving mid-contract, where even Rona had stopped returning their calls out of embarrassment. When the notice came in that they were putting the company assets up for auction, I already had a bid in place. Through a proxy firm I'd hired, I picked up the factory equipment, all office property, and the customer database. 4 cents on the dollar. It was surreal walking through the building again. Desks half cleared, coffee mugs still sitting on filing cabinets, paper signs curling at the corners from neglect. It wasn't the thriving business we had built. It was a skeleton. And yet, I felt more alive than I had in years. I called up the 4 employees who had stuck by me through it all. Marty from logistics, Keisha in quality control, Dom from engineering, and Araceli in procurement. I gave them raises and asked if they were ready to build something new. They said yes without hesitation. I renamed the company Brenner Precision Works. Smaller, leaner, and focused on quality over expansion. I decided we wouldn't chase the same scale anymore. No flashy investor rounds. No branding teams from New York. Just engineering, the way my father taught me. Just work that spoke for itself. Melina tried calling me again a week later. I didn't pick up. She sent an email instead. Carter, I know we hurt you. I know things got out of hand. But we're family. I don't want to fight anymore. Maybe we could meet for lunch? Talk face to face? I miss the old days. I stared at the message for a long time. She didn't miss me. She missed the stability, the success, the certainty I used to bring to her life. The old days, she ruined the moment she decided to humiliate me in front of a boardroom full of staff, smirking like she had won. No, I didn't reply. Instead, I closed my laptop, walked into the factory floor, and helped Dom realign a lathe that had been acting up since we brought it back from auction. Hands on metal. Real work. The kind that doesn't lie. Dom handed me a wrench without saying a word. He didn't need to. We were back in the rhythm we had before the chaos, before boardrooms and balance sheets and backroom deals. Back when the hardest part of the day was coaxing a stubborn piece of steel into shape, not second-guessing the people you trusted most. We worked in silence for a while, just the clinking of tools and hum of the overhead lights keeping us company. Dom finally spoke while tightening a bolt. "Never thought I'd see you here again," he said, not looking up. I gave a dry laugh. Didn't think I'd be here either. But I guess the universe has a sense of humor. He nodded. "You did the right thing. Everyone saw what they were doing, Carter. We just didn't know how far they'd take it." It was weird hearing that. Validation. I didn't realize how much I needed it. For months, I'd felt like a ghost, like the world had moved on, and I was the fool left holding the plans to a house that had already burned down. But I wasn't a ghost. I was back. Word started spreading through the local industry pretty quickly that I'd reclaimed the company. Suppliers began reaching out again, tentatively at first, then more confidently. We had to rebuild trust, but it turned out that in a town like Rochester, where people remember who shows up and who screws them over, my name still carried weight. The funny thing? My first major new client wasn't even in the same industry. It was a local vocational college looking for custom rigs for training students in mechanical automation. They'd heard about me through Araceli, whose cousin worked on their admin team. They needed affordable, high-quality components. Nothing fancy, just reliable equipment. I jumped at it. The money wasn't huge, but it was clean, honest. And more than that, it felt like breathing again. Meanwhile, Melina and Daria weren't faring so well. I didn't go looking for updates, but they found their way to me anyway. Rona still spoke to one of the receptionists who'd moved on from our company during the fallout, and I guess people talk. They'd moved in together in a rented townhouse outside Sarasota, trying to launch a consulting firm focused on family business development. The irony wasn't lost on me. Apparently, they were pitching themselves as specialists in restructuring leadership roles in mid-tier businesses. I nearly laughed out loud when I read that in a LinkedIn update. The problem was, they had no credibility left. Every investor who'd been burned by the collapse of Brenner Modular was now blacklisting them quietly, but firmly. One of them, a guy named Jeff Kravitz, who I'd once shared a beer with at a trade show in Columbus, even forwarded me an email Melina sent trying to secure funding. She says she's an expert in sustainable growth strategies, he wrote. Should I remind her she tanked a profitable company in under a year? I didn't reply, but I saved the email, just in case. Late one evening, I stopped by the old garage where it all started, my dad's garage in Irondequoit. The place hadn't changed much. The workbench still had a crack in the corner where I dropped a torque wrench 15 years ago. The floor smelled of old oil and faint mildew. It was like walking into a preserved version of my younger self. I found a dusty box marked Prototypes 2003 to 2006. Inside were early sketches of our first modular system. No one else had ever seen them. My dad had labeled each one with the date, even noted the adjustments we made after each failed stress test. It hit me hard, how far I'd let things drift from this. From the purity of building, creating, failing, and trying again. Somewhere along the way, I started believing that growth meant stepping away from the hands-on part. Delegating, trusting others to carry the vision forward. That was my real mistake. Not trusting Melina or Daria. People change. I can't blame myself for not predicting who they'd become. My mistake was stepping away from the work. The quiet, slow work that can't lie to you. We moved the new company's main operations into a smaller building on the west side. Cheaper rent, fewer distractions. I let go of any dreams of scaling quickly or attracting venture capital. We'd go back to what worked, solving real problems, building reliable systems, keeping promises. In that space, I found something I hadn't realized I'd lost: satisfaction. Not happiness, not yet, but satisfaction. That feeling that at the end of the day, your hands hurt, your shirt smells like machine oil, and you know exactly what you did with your time. Melina's silence grew over the months. No more texts. No more emails. Maybe she'd finally realized it was over. Not just the company, but everything. Or maybe she was waiting for another opportunity to slither back. Either way, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. One afternoon in early March, Araceli walked into my office, a converted corner of the factory floor, and dropped a package on my desk. Brown paper, no return address. Inside was a thick folder. Legal documents, licensing agreements, patent transfer requests. All unsigned. All dated from years ago. There was a note. We should have handled this differently. I wish I had listened when you tried to slow things down. I wish I hadn't rushed. I don't expect forgiveness. But maybe now you'll understand I never stopped believing in what you built. I just thought I could do it better. I was wrong. And I folded the letter and slid it into my drawer. No reply. I kept the letter in the top drawer of my desk for weeks. I never told anyone about it. Not Araceli, not Jennifer, not even Dom. Every now and then, I'd open the drawer, stare at the folded paper, then close it again. Melina's words weren't an apology, not really. They were a kind of quiet surrender. Not asking for redemption, just dropping her guilt at my feet and walking away from it. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do with that. And truthfully, I didn't have the bandwidth to dwell. We were busy. Busier than I expected for a new business with a modest setup. The word had gotten out. First, it was small companies in upstate New York needing prototypes for automation tools. Then a surgical device startup in Albany reached out. Then 2 old clients from the Brenner Modular days, companies that had once walked away after the fallout, came back quietly, saying they were happy to work with Carter directly again. It felt good. Not like revenge. Not like a win. Just right. But not everything was smooth. I'd underestimated how much trust had been lost in the industry after the implosion. Some suppliers wanted steep upfront payments. Clients took longer to sign. We had a few late nights where I caught Dom staring at the spreadsheets, muttering about margins, scratching his head like we were back in the garage days. And then there was the lawsuit. I should have expected it. Not from Melina or Daria. They were effectively out of the game by then. But one of the original investors from the previous company, a guy named Trevor Langley, filed a claim that my retaining the patent had intentionally sabotaged the company's ability to operate in good faith. It was nonsense, but expensive nonsense. Jennifer assured me we'd beat it, and I believed her. But the pressure was there. The time, the cost, the way it slowed everything else down. Trevor had been one of the early backers. He never liked me. Said I was too blue-collar to run a company that handled real money. He liked Melina. Thought she was polished, marketable. He didn't care about the tech. He cared about the pitch deck. Now he was trying to claw something back, hoping I'd fold or offer a settlement just to get him off my back. But I didn't fold. I didn't build all this just to hand it over to a man who once told me, to my face, that engineers are replaceable. We gathered our paperwork, documented the entire timeline, and countersued for defamation and damages tied to false claims affecting vendor relationships. It dragged on. Most lawsuits do. But I kept working. It was during this chaos that something unexpected happened. An email landed in my inbox from a name I hadn't seen in years, Shane Merrick. Shane had been our first ever out-of-state client. A small-time robotics startup in Toledo that needed joint systems that could withstand repeated torque from compact servos. We built him a custom design in 2009. He paid late, but he paid. And after that, we worked together a few more times before he disappeared into bigger things. Turns out Shane had made it. He was now CTO of a growing industrial automation firm in Cleveland with government contracts and a need for durable, adaptable modular systems. His message was short. Heard about the fallout. Sounds like you're back on your feet. If you're open to talking, I've got a project coming up and I'd rather deal with a guy who understands machines than another MBA with buzzwords. I drove to Cleveland that weekend. Shane hadn't changed much. A little grayer, a little more polished, but still wore oil-stained boots to meetings and called everyone brother. We sat in his office, surrounded by metal parts and whiteboards filled with sketches. I followed the patent thing, he said, tapping a pen against his desk. Nasty mess. You kept your head through it. I didn't see the point in making noise, I said. Truth has its own schedule. He grinned. That it does. The contract wasn't huge, at least not up front, but it was the right kind of work. Precision pieces, military-grade specs, steady pipeline, and Shane made it clear. He wanted me, not just the company. We've got the investors, he said. You've got the grit. Let's see if we can meet in the middle. I signed the deal 2 days later. With that contract came new hires. I brought in a few folks I'd known from my earlier days. Some old names from the factory floor I hadn't spoken to in years. A few of them were skeptical, asking if the sisters were still involved. I assured them they weren't. Still, every now and then, I'd get a subtle question. A sideways glance. As if people were testing whether I'd fall into the same trap again. I didn't blame them. People want to believe in leaders, but they don't want to be burned twice. One morning, about 2 months after the Shane deal, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. I almost didn't pick up. Carter? This is Ray, the voice said. Rona's husband. That caught me off guard. I barely remembered Rona's second husband, a quiet man who kept to himself at family events. She's in the hospital, he said. It's not good. She's asking for you. I hesitated. It had been almost a year since I'd seen any of them. A year since the betrayal, the fallout, the silence. But something about his voice cut through the fog. I went. Rona looked smaller than I remembered. The hospital lights washed out her face, made her seem years older. She smiled weakly when I walked in. You're still wearing that same old coat, she whispered. It's warm, I said. She reached for my hand. Her grip was light, but familiar. She'd been many things over the years. Critical, protective, overly involved. But she'd never been cruel to me. Not like her daughters. I told them they were fools, she said. But they didn't listen. I know. You're not here for them, she said. You're here for me. I nodded. I needed to tell you, she continued, coughing lightly. You were the only one who ever treated this family like it was worth building, even before the business. I didn't say anything. She closed her eyes, resting. They're lost, Carter. Both of them. And I don't know if they'll ever come back from it. Her words hung in the air, thick and uncomfortable. They made their choices, I said finally. She nodded, barely. I know, but I had to say it. Rona passed away quietly a few weeks later. There was no dramatic last-minute plea, no family reconnection at her bedside. She was simply gone, and with her, the last tether I had to that side of the family that didn't come weighted with betrayal. I attended the funeral, sat in the back, wore a dark suit, kept my head down. Melina saw me. So did Daria. Neither approached me. Melina looked different, older, thinner, like someone whose days were filled with regret and not much sleep. She gave me a brief, tight nod across the pews. I didn't nod back. After the service, I slipped out before the reception. I didn't want closure. I'd already found mine. Back at the shop, things were finally running smoothly. Shane's contract had grown into a long-term relationship. More referrals were trickling in. We had clients from Vermont, Pennsylvania, and even one from British Columbia asking about custom orders. Araceli was fielding calls faster than we could respond. Then, out of nowhere, I got an email that made me pause. Subject line, offer to discuss an acquisition. It was from a corporate consulting firm representing none other than Melina and Daria. They were trying to sell what was left of their Florida-based family business development venture. Apparently, it hadn't just failed, it had bled them dry. Lawsuits from ex-clients. Refund demands. A trademark dispute they didn't have the funds to fight. And now, they were looking for someone to buy the remains, client lists, branding, even the domain name. The asking price? Laughably optimistic. But here's where the satisfying part begins. I didn't ignore it. I had my legal team make an anonymous offer through one of our partner firms. A number so low it bordered on insulting. Just enough to pay off their remaining business debts and allow them to walk away with nothing. They took it. Desperation will do that. A week later, I owned everything. Their company name, their branding, their customer lists, even their precious tagline about restructuring legacy systems with emotional intelligence. I printed it on a plaque and hung it in the break room as a joke. Then I decommissioned the entire operation, took down the website, closed the phone lines, redirected all emails to a dummy inbox. Gone. Just like that. No press release. No announcements. Just quiet erasure. Poetic in its own small way. A few months later, I ran into Daria by chance. Wegmans in Pittsford. She was pushing a cart with half-price produce and a few boxes of instant rice. I almost walked right past her. She stopped me. "Carter," she said, trying to sound cheerful. I gave her a long, neutral stare. "Daria." She bit her lip, clearly unsure whether to keep going. "I heard what happened. With the buyout. That was you, wasn't it?" I shrugged. "You didn't have to do that." "I know." She shifted her weight. Her eyes darted to the floor, then back up. "You're not going to say anything?" "Gloat." I looked her dead in the eye. "You called me dead weight. Remember?" She flinched. "I didn't gloat then. I'm not going to start now." And with that, I walked away. No final jabs. No victory laps. Just the sound of my boots echoing off the tile and her silence in my wake. Dom and Araceli threw a small party the day we signed our 100th client since the restart. Nothing fancy. Pizza, local beer, a few ridiculous balloons. But there was laughter and music and people who wanted to be there. At one point, Araceli raised her plastic cup and toasted to Carter, who didn't just rebuild the company, he made it better. Everyone cheered. And I'll admit, I felt something warm rise in my chest. Not pride, not vengeance. Peace. The kind of peace that only comes when you've been to hell, walked out of it carrying your dignity, and left the ones who dragged you there to sit in the ashes of their own making. I didn't destroy them. They did that themselves.